Hello, and welcome to a deep dive from Hidden Front History. When we talk about World War II, the focus tends to fall on, the big battles, the grand strategies, the sheer violence of it all.
Right, the troop movements, the technology.
Exactly. But today, we're shifting our lens to a much quieter and in some ways a much more insidious battlefield. We're talking about the human mind.
And specifically, the psychological weight of a weapon you almost never hear about in war. Mercy.
That's a perfect way to put it. We've been digging through this really extraordinary set of sources, diaries, military records, post-war interviews, all centered on a small, largely forgotten group of Japanese military nurses.
They were captured late in the Pacific War, and their story, particularly that of a nurse named Keiko Yamamoto, is just a masterclass in cognitive dissonance.
It really is. They were taken to a U.S. POW facility on Guam. This is between 1944 and 1945. And the sources just reveal this profound, almost paralyzing contradiction. And that's where we're going to start.
So let's set the scene.
Yeah, it's December 1944. A transport ship has just docked at Guam. 23 Japanese nurses are ordered off.
And they are just freezing, shivering uncontrollably.
Their uniforms, these thin cotton things meant for the tropics, are just soaked, damp with salt and ocean spray from the voyage. And they're utterly, completely terrified.
And we have to be clear, this wasn't just a generic fear of the unknown. This was a very specific, carefully engineered terror.
How so?
For years, they had been steeped in this relentless military propaganda. They believed they knew exactly what was waiting for them at the hands of the American devils.
Which was what, according to the propaganda?
Torture, sexual assault, being paraded through the streets as trophies of war, and then, an inevitable, painful execution. That was the script they had been given.
So the expectation was absolute, visceral brutality. And it's so important to stop here and really understand why that expectation was so central to their whole worldview.
It was the foundation of everything.
Right. Their whole framework, their sense of duty, their loyalty, their willingness to sacrifice everything. It was all built on the certainty that the enemy was inhuman.
Exactly. If the enemy's a barbarian, then your sacrifice is noble. It makes sense. It gives the suffering a purpose.
It creates a clear moral boundary. We are honorable, they are monsters. That justifies everything they had endured and everything they were prepared to face. It gave a structure to their suffering.
But then that whole structure just begins to shatter in the most unexpected way possible.
A U.S. Marine sergeant walks up to the group. He's huge compared to them, looks tired, weathered, and he's holding a little piece of paper.
And he starts reading from it. Clumsy, halting, broken Japanese, a phonetic script probably.
And he points. He points across the compound to this large canvas tent. It's glowing, lit from the inside by a generator.
And this is it. This is the shocking invitation. In that broken Japanese, he says, inside, hot food, blankets.
The sources are so clear about this moment. The women didn't move. They didn't rush toward the warmth.
They froze.
They froze solid. They were expecting a bayonet, an interrogation, something that would confirm their reality. Instead, they smell coffee. They hear the hiss of a kerosene heater.
And the sources note that this simple act of kindness, the tent, the warmth, the food, was, and this is a quote, somehow more terrifying than the brutality they had braced for.
Why? Why more terrifying?
Because brutality would have validated everything. It would have proven their propaganda right. It would have made sense.
But kindness.
Kindness shatters their entire worldview in an instant. It introduces this unbearable complexity where they only expected absolutes. The idea that the enemy might actually be human, that was the most dangerous psychological threat they could possibly face.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to follow the personal journey of Keiko Yamamoto and her fellow nurses. We're going to trace how their captivity forced them to confront the inadequacy of their own ideology.
And what it really means to survive when mercy itself becomes a form of psychological torment.
To understand that damage, though, we first have to understand the foundation that was being shattered. We have to go back to before the capture.
Right. To her world on Tinian.
Let's talk about Keiko Yamamoto. She's 24, a field nurse at a military hospital on Tinian since 1942. What were the core beliefs that really anchored her world?
Her commitment was, it was more than just patriotic. It was existential. The core beliefs she was required to hold were, one, Japan was bringing order and prosperity to Asia.
The Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere.
Exactly. Two, they were the essential defense against corrupt Western imperialism. And three, probably the most important one, surrender was not just a failure, It was a spiritual contamination, a deep dishonor.
The idea of ryokusai, right?
Yeah.
Honorable self-destruction.
It permeated everything. Better to die than to be captured. So the reality of maintaining that loyalty was just unbelievably grueling. We're talking 18-hour shifts in a dimly lit, camouflaged hospital.
Trying to stay invisible from the air.
And the human cost she was dealing with every single day was just staggering. Horrific wounds from bullets, shrapnel, tropical diseases.
And flamethrowers. The sources are very specific about the burns.
The devastating, deep tissue burns from American flamethrowers. She wasn't just treating physical injuries, though. She was witnessing the complete collapse of morale. Men weeping, men staring into space, their minds just fractured by combat.
It sounds like her survival really depended on a kind of emotional dissociation.
It had to. She had to focus on the physical tasks, cleaning wounds, changing bandages, and these were bandages that often had to be washed and reused because of shortages.
Wow.
Administering tiny amounts of morphine, or just holding a cup of water for a dying soldier. She had to just push all that suffering down. That denial was part of the cost of loyalty.
And the physical deprivation, it mirrored that psychological scarcity.
Completely. Her uniform, once white, was now a faded gray. Her hands were permanently stained yellow-brown from iodine.
Her back constantly aching from bending over patients.
And the food. It was barely subsistence, thin rice gruel, maybe some pickled vegetables. But this wasn't seen as a problem, it was seen as proof. Proof of their superior dedication, their spiritual purity, compared to the soft, resource-rich enemy.
Which brings us to her secret diary. Given the constant inspections by the military police, why would she even risk keeping one?
Because it was her only outlet. But it had to be a very specific kind of diary. A strictly professional record.
No emotions.
Zero. Any hint of distress, any questioning of the war, any defeatism, that meant immediate severe punishment. Prison or worse. So she only wrote down bare factual data.
So an entry like the one from November 15th, it says, treated 32 patients today, supplies running low, rice rations reduced again. On the surface, it's just a log.
It's a log, but the real content is the subtext. It's what's not written.
What's the subtext there?
Treated 32 patients means 32 new holes in the defensive line. Supplies running low means more men are going to die from infection. Rations reduced means the staff's energy is plummeting.
So she's performing this kind of ideological self-censorship, even in her private thoughts.
Her personal identity was completely fused with the military machine she was serving. And that fusion point it collapses violently. On November 28th, 1944.
The fall of Tinian. She's in the middle of this mundane task, washing bedpans, and then the American artillery starts.
And it's just overwhelming. The Red Cross markings on their hospital, they meant nothing. Either ignored or just couldn't be seen in the chaos. Within a couple of hours, the hospital was completely surrounded.
So the certainty that they would fight to the last man, to the last woman?
It just evaporated. It was replaced by an impossible, unthinkable reality.
Let's focus on that capture scene. This is the first time the propaganda really slams into the wall of reality. Ko is watching from a window as her commanding officer, Colonel Suzuki.
The ranking doctor, yeah. He carries out the surrender. He ties a white sheet to a bamboo pole and walks out.
And then the Marines appear, out of the jungle.
And you have to imagine the shock, the immediate visceral shock. These Americans looked enormous. Taller, broader than the Japanese soldiers she was used to.
Their uniforms were clean, their equipment looked brand new.
And they moved with this casual, undeniable confidence.
The confidence of winners.
Exactly. This image of overwhelming physical and logistical superiority, it directly contradicts the narrative she's been fed for years about a desperate, morally bankrupt enemy.
The enemy wasn't struggling. The enemy was succeeding, almost effortlessly.
And that terrifying image is just hammered home when the American officer, through a translator, tells them they are now prisoners of war. And you can just feel Ko's stomach drop.
All that propaganda just rushes in. Everything she was told would happen is about to happen.
She looks over at the youngest nurse, Yuki, who's 19?
Just a kid. And she's weeping. The terror is just, it's right there on her face. It's the moment their indoctrination says their fate is sealed.
The war for them had just flipped. It wasn't an ideological battle anymore. It was a terrifying, unpredictable survival scenario. And they had been taught that survival in enemy hands was a fate worse than death.
So they're captured. And now we follow them on this 3-day journey to Guam, where those first cracks in that ideological wall really start to show.
They're loaded onto trucks with wounded Japanese soldiers, heading for the coast. It's hot, no water. But what's the first thing that really jars Ko?
It's the behavior of the guards, the Marines.
It's not what she expected. There's no hatred, no violence, no mockery. The sources describe it as casual indifference.
So they weren't friendly, but they weren't cruel either.
No, they were just following orders. The prisoners were basically logistics items that needed to be moved from point A to point B.
And that lack of personal, visceral hatred has to be a huge psychological jolt. Hatred is something you can understand. You can fight it. Indifference is just bewildering.
It is. Hatred confirms the enemy is a devil who cares about your suffering. Indifference suggests you don't even warrant their attention, you're just a procedure. And that starts to chip away at that sense of moral superiority they held.
They get on the transport ship, and they're put deep in the hold. It's dim, smells of diesel and sweat, and Ko is just wrestling with this profound shame.
The shame of being captured, not martyred.
And the nurses are whispering in the dark, is it poisoned? Are they going to execute us now?
They're just waiting for the cruelty that the propaganda promised them. And then on the second day, they get the first massive, undeniable shock to their physical reality.
The revelation of abundance.
That's it. This is a huge moment.
Describe what they were given. What did the American sailors bring down into that dark hold?
It came on simple metal trays, but what was on them was just shocking. White bread. Soft, professionally baked white bread.
Not the gritty rice gruel.
No. Canned meat, fruit cocktail, and heavy syrup. Even little packets of sugar. And the portions were huge, more food than Ko had seen in a single serving in 2 years.
So their immediate reaction, given their conditioning, has to be deep suspicion.
Oh, absolutely palpable. They just stared at it. They whispered, is it poison? Is this a trick to fatten us up before they torture us? They literally could not compute an act of generosity. Generosity had to be a weapon.
But at some point, basic human biology, just sheer hunger, has to override the ideology.
Yes, and it wins powerfully. Kal finally takes a bite of the bread. The sources describe the shock of the texture. It's soft, it's fresh, the taste of clean flour.
It awakens this deep, suppressed hunger she'd been denying for years in the name of duty.
And that simple act just overwhelms them. The sources say some of the nurses just broke down. They started crying silently as they chewed. It wasn't just food, it was proof. Proof that their constant state of deprivation might have been pointless.
And if that wasn't enough, their arrival in Guam a few days later confirms this new, terrifying reality on a monumental scale.
Guam was a vision of industrial might. They're being driven from the docks, and the scene just completely contradicts the propaganda of a weak, soft America.
What do they see?
The harbor is jammed with ships, lined up back to back. Planes are constantly roaring overhead. There are paved roads and huge supply depots stretching as far as they can see.
This is where Ko has that critical insight. This was not the weak, exhausted America from the newsreels.
Not at all. This looked like, and this is her phrasing, a machine that could not be stopped. She realized the war wasn't a contest of moral will like they'd been told.
It was a contest of logistics, of production capacity.
A contest Japan had already lost, not on the battlefield, but in the factory. She was seeing the truth of it right there.
And as they're marched to the processing facility, the treatment is still just efficient. Impersonal. They pass a sign, POW Processing Facility Minor 7. And this brings us right back to that moment. Shivering, terrified, standing in front of a warm tent.
And the warmth of that kerosene heater, the brightness of the electric lights, it must have felt like stepping into another universe compared to the dim, damp field hospital they just left.
Physical comfort as a psychological weapon.
Exactly. And waiting for Ko, who's the first to be processed, is an American nurse, Lieutenant Morrison.
Describe her.
She's in khaki, projecting this calm professionalism, but what's truly shocking is her expression. The sources say she offered an unexpected expression, a smile.
A smile.
And she speaks careful, practiced Japanese. Konnichiwa, I am Lieutenant Morrison. I am a nurse. I will check your health. It is required. Nothing bad will happen.
And Ko's mind immediately goes to, what, the trap?
Yeah.
This has to be a trick.
Yes, the trap mentality. Kindness is a prelude to psychological torture. You make the victim trust you, and then you shatter that trust. She was just bracing for the switch to flip.
It never does.
It never does. What she gets instead is just professional decency. Morrison is calm, steady. She senses Ko's fear, so she moves slowly, telegraphing every action. She shows her the stethoscope, explains in simple terms, listen to heart, listen to lungs.
No questions about military movements.
Nothing. No abuse, no mockery, just basic, necessary medical work. She's being treated like a patient, not an enemy.
And the diagnosis itself must have just deepened the confusion.
It did. Morrison finishes and says, "You are healthy but underweight. You need food, rest." Ko was just dazed. Every single thing she expected to happen was wrong. The enemy was refusing to play their assigned role.
But the real breaking point, the true emotional climax, happens next, at the shower tent.
The panic is primal. When the sergeant points them toward the next tent, they think, this is it. This is where the real degradation begins. The stripping, the photos, the humiliation.
Yuki, the youngest, is just whispering, I can't do this.
But what's amazing here is you see the American adherence to procedure just triumph over any opportunity for cruelty.
The sergeant sees their distress.
Instantly, and he holds up his hands and firmly assures them, no men inside, only women guards, safe. He points to 2 female GIs standing nearby. He could have exploited their fear, but instead he followed a rule that protected their dignity.
So they go inside the tent. This is a critical sensory moment. What hits come first?
The steam, the moisture, but the dominant smell is real soap. Not the harsh stuff they knew, but thick, white, smooth syrup with a light floral scent. And the sound of hot water just pounding down.
And she steps under it.
She steps under the water and she just gasps. It's this involuntary full-body reaction. And that's the moment the dam of her self-control just breaks.
She starts to cry.
Not from sadness, not from pain. It's from release. The water is washing away the grime, the iodine, the smell of death, and years of iron willpower that held her together. It's a surrender to the impossible relief of being clean and safe and warm.
A surrender to decency.
The aftermath completes it. She dries with a thick, soft towel that smells of laundry soap and sunshine. She's given clean, tan cotton clothes. She is physically renewed, but psychologically just ravaged by this kindness.
Which is captured perfectly in her diary that night. She's trying so hard to make sense of it.
She's not writing facts anymore. She's writing these desperate questions. Animals are not given hot showers. Animals are not given soap that smells like flowers. What is happening? Is this real or is this a trap?
And then the key line.
I am afraid to hope. Hope is dangerous, but I am clean and I do not know how to feel about that.
Hope is dangerous because it forces her to accept that the enemy isn't a devil. And if they're not a devil, then maybe her entire cause was built on a lie. It's safer to believe in hatred.
And this is just the beginning of the real psychological torment. She's clean, she's warm, and now she has to figure out how to reconcile that comfort with what feels like a total betrayal of her nation.
The pressure just keeps ratcheting up as the weeks go by, leading to this crushing guilt of survival. The next morning, the mess tent revelation proves that the kindness wasn't a one-off.
This is where the sheer scale of American wealth becomes just palpable. She walks into the mess tent and sees a full hot breakfast. Scrambled eggs with real butter, thick toast, bacon, coffee, orange juice, oatmeal with brown sugar.
And the portions were just staggering.
Yuki, the youngest, just stares at her plate and whispers, all of this. The contrast with the thin gruel they left behind on Tinian is just impossible to process.
But the critical realization isn't just about the quantity. It's about the context.
Exactly. She realizes this isn't some special treatment for POWs. This is just normal for the Americans. They just grab a tray and eat. It's not a big deal.
So if this level of resource security is the baseline for the average American soldier,
then the question in her mind shifts completely. It's not, how can Japan win anymore? It's, how could Japan ever even compete?
the war was lost logistically before the first shot was fired, and she's seeing the proof on her breakfast plate.
That's a monumental cognitive shift. It reframes the whole war. It's not a moral struggle anymore. It's a logistical failure. It suggests that all their suffering, their sacrifice, was for a cause that was structurally unwinnable from the start.
And her work assignment just deepens this painful realization. She's put to work as a nurse in a permanent wooden medical building.
Right, which immediately contrasts with the temporary disease-ridden tents she came from. And the wealth of supplies is just astonishing to her.
What kind of things?
She describes seeing 2,400 fresh, sterile rolls of bandages, 5,000 aspirin tablets just sitting in a box, an actual working x-ray machine that's treated as if it's unremarkable.
In her hospital, one clean bandage was a treasure. Here, abundance was just mundane.
But the real shift, the thing that really breaks down the barrier, comes through human connection. Working under a medic from Ohio, a Corporal Davis.
And what's he like?
He's friendly, patient. He treats her like a professional colleague, not a prisoner. And he actively humanizes himself. He talks to her, shows her this blurry photo of his pregnant wife, Mary, back home.
And he says something to her that is completely alien to her worldview.
He says, with the simple optimism, after war, you go home, see them. The idea of after the war. Kamiez was trained to fight to the death. Going home was almost seen as an act of cowardice. For Davis, war is just a temporary interruption before you go back to normal life.
A normal life underpinned by all that incredible resource security.
So as Ko's body responds to the good food and safety, her face fills out, she gains weight, her collarbones aren't so sharp anymore, she's becoming physically healthy.
But this physical recovery brings on this crushing guilt.
The guilt arrives in a letter, a heavily censored, months-old letter from her mother in Hiroshima. The details are sparse, but it mentions scarce food and her father's failing health.
So Ko's sleeping under warm blankets, eating roast chicken at holiday meals in the camp while their family is starving.
And that contrast is just devastating. The sources confirm this crushing sense of betrayal. Every moment of simple contentment, the hot shower, the fresh bread, it felt like treason. She was surviving because of the enemy, and her survival was a luxury her family didn't have.
The psychological torment of comfort. It stripped her of the nobility of her own suffering.
It did, and this all comes to a head with the incident involving the chocolate.
Corporal Davis gives her a small bar of chocolate.
Just as a simple thank you. She helped with a difficult procedure. For her, the chocolate is this almost mythical luxury she hasn't tasted in 3 years. She takes it back to her barracks, takes a bite, and she just starts to cry.
Why? It's not just about the taste.
It's about the source. It was an unsolicited, genuine act of kindness. Davis was undeniably, uncomfortably human, and she couldn't sustain the hatred she was supposed to feel for this man who saw her as a professional and gave her a simple gift.
If Davis is human, then the propaganda is a lie.
And if the propaganda is a lie, her suffering, Japan's suffering, was for nothing. The chocolate was delicious, but the moral implications were poisonous to her entire ideology.
And this isn't just her own internal struggle. The sources show this debate is happening in whispers among all the nurses in the barracks.
Right, you have Sachiko, the skeptic, who's desperately clinging to the old narrative. She insists it's all just sophisticated psychological warfare.
Designed to break their will.
To make them soft, so that when they go back to Japan, they'll be susceptible to American influence. She's trying so hard to fit this new reality back into the old framework.
But Ko, having experienced this kindness firsthand, starts to question that.
She voices the core dilemma of their captivity. She asks, if kindness is manipulation, what is cruelty? Japan told us the enemy would torture us. Instead, they feed us to break us.
She's realizing that if one method of power preserves life while undermining ideology, maybe that method is actually more powerful than the brute force they expected.
The foundation of hatred is just crumbling, and by the spring and summer of 1945, the sheer scale of American power is on display every single day, leading to these final confrontations with their own beliefs.
How so?
Ko gets a work shift in the camp canteen, stocking shelves, and what she sees there moves beyond just food and into industrial-scale luxury. 20 brands of cigarettes, 10 types of candy bars, stacks of Coca-Cola crates.
All available to regular soldiers without limits.
It confirms her earlier realization from the mess tent, but on a commercial, staggering scale. This isn't just a military that can feed itself. It's an entire consumer society operating at a level of abundance Japan can't even fathom.
It makes their sacrifices back home seem so small, so desperate.
It does, and this casual abundance exists side by side with these moments of just unbelievable absurdity, like the movie screenings.
Right, attendance was optional, but they went.
And first, they'd show the newsreels. American war production. Factories churning out planes, tanks rolling off assembly lines. The logical explanation for their captivity.
But then, they'd show a Hollywood comedy.
And that shift is just catastrophic for their ideological purity. The sources talk about this moment of laughter in a prison camp. Yuki, the youngest, just giggles at a scene. And Ko writes that it felt wrong, absurd, almost treasonous.
They're laughing alongside their captors at their captors' own culture.
They're being assimilated, not by force, but by a shared, simple human experience. The humanization is almost complete.
Which becomes clear when Corporal Davis, the further medic, gets reassigned in May. He's going home. His wife had their baby, Emily Rose.
And Ko realizes she's going to genuinely miss him.
She's grieving the departure of an enemy. She saw him as a colleague, a connection to a stable, optimistic world.
And this shared experience leads the nurses to this profound, whispered conclusion: I cannot hate them anymore, which forces them to grapple with the core moral question of mercy.
The question they couldn't answer was, is it weak to show mercy when you have the power to be cruel, or is it weak to need cruelty to feel strong?
Their whole world said mercy was weakness. But seeing American power firsthand, they realize this mercy wasn't coming from weakness. It was coming from a place of overwhelming strength and stability. They had to consider that maybe cruelty was the trait of the weaker side.
And Ko finally gets a chance to articulate this new understanding in July, when a new batch of POWs arrives from Okinawa.
And the physical difference is just stark. Ko and her friends look healthy, rested. The Okinawa soldiers are emaciated, sick, and they're shocked. They demand to know what she did to earn such good treatment.
They assume it's a trick.
They do. And Ko gives them this difficult, anti-ideological answer. No trick. They treat prisoners according to their rules. They give food, they give medical care.
And then her final, devastating conclusion about the American way.
Because they can. Because their rules say they must. It's not an act of emotional weakness. It's a profound display of strength rooted in resource security and operational confidence.
This newfound stability, this understanding she's built, is then just utterly obliterated. August 6th, Hiroshima.
The newsreel announces it. A new weapon. A single bomb has destroyed an entire city, and that city is her home.
The personal devastation is total. Her family, her past, incinerated while she was safe, well-fed, watching movies in an enemy camp.
The rage, the grief. But then comes the ultimate unbearable dissonance. Lieutenant Morrison, the nurse who first treated her with dignity, approaches her. And she offers sincere individual sympathy. War is terrible, so sorry.
So Ko has to hold both truths at once. Morrison's individual kindness and her country's capacity for mass obliteration.
There are no absolutes anymore. Morality isn't a monolith. It's a complex, terrifying contradiction. And that is what she now has to carry forward.
Japan surrenders on August 15th. The war is over. And Ko is just left in the sea of contradictions. Anger at America, anger at Japan, loyalty, betrayal, gratitude, devastation.
And she gets confirmation soon after. Her father and one sister died in the blast. Her mother and another sister survived and are in a refugee camp. And suddenly, the fear of leaving the safety of the American camp is real.
It's a jarring shift. They've been protected by American abundance, and now they have to go back to a starving, devastated homeland.
Which leads to the shared confession among the nurses. Yuki says what they're all thinking.
I am afraid of being hungry again.
The guilt of their survival is immense. How can she possibly face her mother knowing she ate bacon while her family was starving? That comfort she had in captivity becomes this invisible scar she has to carry.
The day before they leave, Lieutenant Morrison gives her a final gift.
A package. And it's so practical, but so symbolic. An English medical textbook, a notebook, 2 pencils, and a fresh bar of soap.
The soap.
And Morrison's last message is, keep being good nurse. War over now. Time to heal. It's a handover of tools for the future. It disconnects Ko's identity from the failed imperial system and invests hope in her professional life.
And Ko's final diary entry from the camp just captures the weight of all this. She's leaving a place that treated her with kindness to return to society that she knows will judge her for surviving so well.
She identifies what the Americans really gave her, hope. But she writes, hope is heavy. It demands that I believe the world can be better than it has been. It forces her to invest in a messy, complex future, not the simple, destructive certainty of the past.
The voyage back, she sees a Japan that looks small, diminished, ports damaged. The defeat is undeniable. She clings to that package.
And when she finally finds her mother in a refugee shelter, the exchange is so brief, but it says everything.
Her mother sees how healthy Ko looks, the weight she's gained, and she cuts through all the ideology and guilt with one sentence.
They fed you.
Ko says yes, they treated them decently. And her mother's final conclusion, coming from the deepest point of trauma and loss, it just overrides all of Ko's guilt. She says, I am glad you are alive. That is all that matters.
It's a profound statement. Physical survival and the possibility of a future that trumps ideological purity.
And that becomes Ko's legacy. She uses the textbook, learns English, and becomes a nurse instructor. Her lesson to her students was always, war is complicated, humans are complicated. That is what I learned.
It's the ultimate transformation from absolute ideological rigidity to this profound, messy human understanding. And it was all driven by the simple refusal of the enemy to be the devil they were supposed to be.
So let's just unpack that for a moment. That bar of soap, the one that smelled like flowers, it really becomes the central symbol of this entire deep dive, doesn't it?
It does. It was proof of this profound contradiction. The expectation of cruelty yielded mercy. The belief in absolutes shattered into this irreversible complexity.
It confirms that the ultimate weapon in that camp wasn't artillery, but decency.
That decency forced self-reflection. It humanized the enemy. It undermined the entire psychological structure that required constant hatred to function. They were physically saved, but their ideology was completely devastated.
Years later, The sources say Code's granddaughter asked her what the hardest part of the war was. Was it the fighting, the hunger, the bombs?
And her answer is just remarkable. It perfectly articulates the complex truth she carried for the rest of her life.
What did you say?
She said, "The hardest part was accepting kindness from people I was supposed to hate. Hatred is easy. It simplifies the world. But kindness from an enemy, that is complicated. It forces you to see them as human, and once you see them as human, you cannot unsee it."
That difficult, unshakable knowledge is what she carried forward. And this deep dive, it really reveals that in the brutal reality of war, mercy isn't weakness. It's a profound strength.
It's a weapon that disarms hatred and forces self-reflection. It's a psychological force more devastating to a rigid ideology than any physical violence.
To grant mercy when you have absolute power, that requires immense discipline. To accept it when you've been conditioned for death, that requires a kind of existential bravery.
A bravery they were forced into, and in doing so, they gained the tools to navigate a much more complicated future.
So we'll leave you with this thought, drawn from Keiko Yamamoto's story. When you're facing conflict, which truly requires more bravery, cruelty, which is easy to administer, or compassion, which forces you to see the humanity on the other side.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into hidden front history.
We'll see you next time.